All right, Larry Krueger here from the Pig and a Pickle Krug Show with a 49er video. Tim Kawakami brought up a very interesting question and then made a strong statement, and I'm not sure that I agree. And so we're going to hit that right here. Thanks to Pig and a Pickle for being the title sponsor of the Krug Show. Check them out. They're in Emeryville. They're in Corte Madera. They're open 7 days a week from 11 a.m. till 8 p.m. or until they run out. And they do run out, so get there early, get some brisket chili. We're also brought to you by Sleeper. We'll tell you more about Sleeper in just a few minutes. All right, let's talk a little bit about Tim Kawakami's question to John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan. And, you know, his thoughts on this offseason are that the Niners need to go big. The Niners need to add a big name, take a big swing. They've got the money to do it. You know, last year was their reset. And according to Tim, he thinks it's time to go big. And he says it's time to see if they can trade for Justin Jefferson. He said an even more obvious potential trade target, Max Crosby, longtime 49er favorite. Then Tim goes on to say if both Jefferson and Crosby are traded this March and the 49ers get neither of them, it would be an off-season failure, which is really, really a strong statement to make. And, you know, I know that a lot of the casuals, and I'm not calling Tim a casual, but he doesn't know the draft. He knows big names. And so, you know, and there's other people like this. I mean, there's people on KBR who I've heard talking about this, and they're like, well, you know, we need big names. Well, if you need big names, maybe you should do your homework a little bit more, because you can't always go with big names. And you can't, and it's not as simple as, well, you know, you don't have a receiver, go get Justin Jefferson. You don't have much pass rush, go get Max Crosby. You know, it's like, and that's not a plan. That's like a one-off. And the 49ers have gotten burned when they've tried to go all in. They tried to go all in on Trey Lance. They traded up from the teens to the top 3 so they could get Trey Lance. And in the process, they traded their first-round pick that year and then 2 more first-round picks in addition to that, in addition to a third-round pick. So they moved 4 picks, some premium picks to the Dolphins to move up so they could get Trey Lance, and it didn't work. And so they lost their number 1 pick. You know, they used their number 1 pick in 22 on Trey, or 21 on Trey, and then they didn't have one in 22, and they didn't have one in 23 because they had traded it for Trey Lance in addition to that, a third-round pick. So they took a big swing on Trey Lance and missed. They took a big swing on Javon Hargrave in free agency. Gave him $40 million, $20 million bonus, another $20 million in salary. You know, they really busted their budget for Javon Hargrave. It didn't work. It didn't work. And here they are. It's 2025, and John Lynch has lost to John Schneider. John Lynch has, you know, if you look at what Seattle has done as far as impact guys in recent years and what the 49ers have done, it's the number one reason that the 49ers are at where they're at, because they're not deep enough. They're not good enough. You know, it's really as simple as that. You know, there's no other way around it. I mean, the 49ers, if you go look at the 49ers and what they've done, they've gone and gotten some, you know, they've gone all in on Hargrave. They've gone all in on Trey Lance. And what do they got to show for it? They're just further and further behind the Seattle Seahawks and the Rams. Look at the list of impact players that John Schneider has drafted and added since 2022. Gray Zabel, Nick Emanwari, Byron Murphy, Devin Witherspoon, Jackson Smith-Njigba, Zach Charbonnet, Charles Cross, Kenneth Walker, Abraham Lucas, Kobe Bryant, Reek Woolen. Look at the impact guys the Niners have added since 2022. Brock Purdy, maybe Upton Stout. That's it. That's the list. Those are the impact players. Look at the impact players the Rams have drafted since 2022. Jared Verse, Braden Fisk, Blake Corum, Cam Kinchins, Byron Young, Kobe Turner, Puka Nacua, Kobe Durant, Kyron Williams, Quentin Lake. If you want to be the Rams and the Seahawks, you got to do what the Rams and the Seahawks do. You got to go find Puka Nacua in the mid rounds and plug him in, right? You've got to find your Jackson Smith-Njigba. You've got to make your move for Reek Woolen. You've got to find guys after the first round. This shortcut culture is never going to get you there. Let's talk about it for a second. If the 49ers were to trade for Max Crosby, what do you think realistically that would cost them? They have the 27th pick in the first round. That's obviously going to go to the Raiders. But the Raiders aren't going to take the 27th pick in the first round for Max Crosby. They're going to want your first round pick next year. They're going to want your second round pick this year. You're going to probably have to trade 3 or 4 day 1 or day 2 picks to the Raiders if you want Max Crosby. Okay. And that fills your defensive end need. There's no doubt. You'd have Bose on one side. You'd have Max Crosby on the other side. And, man, you would be in business. But what about all your other needs? How are you going to fill those needs? You're going to have a big-name guy, but this is no different than the Warriors when they had Durant and they had a couple injuries, and suddenly they weren't nearly as good. Because if you invest all your money in 2 or 3 stars and then those guys go down with injuries, you're screwed. And in football, in an injury-rich sport where there's injuries, always, I don't think that's the way to go. I think it's the casual fan way to go. It's something that people would yell from the upper deck. Go get Justin Jefferson. Why? Because they don't know anybody else. Go get Max Crosby. Why? Because they don't know anybody else. And that's basically where Tim's coming from. Ask Tim if you countered him and said, no, Tim, I don't think they ought to go for Crosby. I think they ought to go for one of the top defensive ends in the draft. Which one do you think they should go for? He'd give you the blankest of blank stares. If you said to him, I don't think they ought to go for Justin Jefferson. I think they should draft, maybe linemen in the first couple rounds and, find some sleeper wide receivers in the third, fourth, and fifth round. Tim, which one should they grab? He doesn't know. He would give you a blank stare. He has no idea. So it's easy to say, go get Justin Jefferson. Go get that shiny object. That sounds like a fan. That's a fan take. Go get the best guy on the board when you have a ton of needs. Let's look at what the 49ers' actual needs are. Okay, let's talk about it for a second before they pour all their assets into one receiver, all their assets into one defensive end. I mean, that is first of all, it sounds great. And it's a sexy name, and you're going to get the fans all titillated. Max Crosby, yeah, man, get Max Crosby. Justin Jefferson, yeah, get Justin Jefferson. But what if it's you get Max Crosby and then you have terrible receivers and a terrible offensive line and no depth anywhere? Are you still wanting Max Crosby? What happens if you get Justin Jefferson, but you have no pass rush, no linebackers, no corners, no offensive line? But you have Justin Jefferson. You still want Justin Jefferson? You want Max Crosby on a winner. You want Justin Jefferson on a winner. But look at the 49ers. Look at their real needs. Let's just go through their real needs. Here is their depth chart. Okay, we'll start on the offensive side. What are their needs on the offensive side? Well, Jawan Jennings is a free agent. Ricky Pearsall is glass, can't stay healthy, can't be leaned on. Bourne is a free agent and old. Watkins did nothing for you this year. Sky Moore is a free agent. Brandon Ayuk is going to be either released or traded. Jacob Cowing hasn't done anything in 2 years. Trent Taylor is probably going to retire. What do you got? What do you have at wide receiver next year that you can count on? Jacob Cowing? Can you count on Jacob Cowing? Probably not. Can you count on Jordan Watkins? I really like him, but, that would be a stretch. Can you count on Demarcus Robinson? Yeah. Yep. You can count on Demarcus Robinson. He'll be a pretty decent player. So you have injured Ricky Pearsall, Demarcus Robinson, who's a middling veteran, and a couple of flyers on draft picks that, either haven't done it in 1 year or in Cowing's case, haven't done it in a couple years. And that's your wide receiver core. That's it right there. So you don't need a wide receiver. You need 2 wide receivers. You may need 3 wide receivers. You have a huge need at wide receiver. And yeah, do you need a number 1? Yeah. But you need a number 2 and a number 3. And I mean, you need an entire wide receiver core. All right, let's go to the offensive line. The 49ers got dominated by Seattle. Seattle's defensive line kicked the Niners' offensive line's ass. The 49ers only in 2 games at the end of the year against Seattle with Trent Williams, Hall of Famer, Christian McCaffrey, Hall of Famer, Kyle Shanahan calling the plays. George Kittle in one of those games, Pearsall in another one of those games, Jennings, their existing line. They got into the red zone once. One time. One trip to the red zone in 2 games against Seattle's defense. So your offensive line can't move anybody. They can't move Byron Murphy. They can't move Leonard Williams. They can't move anybody. They can't run for a yard. Shanahan didn't even try. So you have huge needs on your offensive line. Who's your left tackle of the future? You don't have one. And your left tackle's on his 18th year. Who's your left guard? You don't have one. Spencer Burford's a free agent and likely is going to walk away. Who's your center? You don't have one. Jake Brendel obviously cannot be trusted. That's why Shanahan didn't run on 3rd and 1 and 4th and 1, because he knew Brendel would get blown up. So what do you got on the offensive line? You got Trent Williams in the twilight. You got McKivitz, who's a solid right tackle, and you have Pooney, who's a solid right guard. So minimum, you need a left guard and a center and 2 wide receivers and your future left tackle. That's 5 needs. 2 receivers, 2 linemen, and then probably your future left tackle. So you have 5 needs just on wide receiver and tight end. Oh, did I mention that George Kittle likely is not going to play next year? Or if he is, he's not going to play a full year. So your backup tight end was Luke Farrell, who stinks, and Braden Willis, who stinks, and Jake Tonjes, who's just a receiver. So you need a big-time tight end. So now you have 6 needs on offense. Is Mac Jones coming back? If he is, great. Now you're covered at quarterback. If he isn't, do you want to bring in a veteran quarterback? Maybe. There's a 7th need. Who's your backfield? You're not going to. Brian Robinson's a free agent. Juice is in the twilight. CMC is older, needs to have another back or 2 around him. Garendo's not NFL. Patrick Taylor is just a special teamer. So what do you got? You got old Juszczyk. You got McCaffrey off a season where he had 450 touches. He misses like 10 games a year coming off of that kind of a usage. And then Jordan James in the following year. Expect that. And then Jordan James looked pretty good at the end of the year, but that's it. That's all you got. You need 5 or 6 running backs. And what do you got? You got McCaffrey and Jordan James. That's it. So you have a huge need at running back, huge need at tight end, huge need on the offensive line, huge need at wide receiver. I mean, we're talking about 2 wide receivers, minimum 2 offensive linemen, at least 1 tight end, and probably at least 2 backs. That's 6. That's 6 needs on your offense. We haven't even gotten to the defense. You have 6 needs on offense. You're really gonna pour all your assets into Justin Jefferson? Even if you could get Justin Jefferson, who's gonna block for Purdy? Who's gonna run the ball? Who's gonna be your tight end? I mean, 6 needs on offense is a lot of needs. That's a lot of needs. All right, let's flip it over to the defensive side of the ball. What do they need on defense? Well, their linebacking core is totally decimated. Fred Warner's coming off a major injury. Winters is not strong enough at the point to stand up to the run. He's probably more of a part-timer. Gifford is a special teamer. Bethune is challenged speed-wise. He's a backup. Nick Martin is still in the concussion protocol for a concussion that he suffered 2 months ago in November. So I got to think his career is very much in doubt. Kendricks is old. Curtis Robinson is a special teamer only. Same for Garrett Wallow. This team used to have Dre Greenlaw, Fred Warner, and Azeez Al-Shaair all in their prime. Right now, they don't have anything. They have Fred coming off a major injury, maybe Winters, maybe Bethune. Gifford's a free agent, and he was only a special teamer. Martin can't play because of injury. Wallow's a special teamer. Kendricks, they got nothing. They're going to have to draft for sure 2 linebackers for sure. I like the safeties, Malik Mustafa, Marquise Siegel, Jair Brown, but other people said they need another safety. So that now you got 3 needs. You got 2 linebackers, you need a safety. They definitely need another big corner. I think they're probably disenchanted with Renardo Green. I can see him being traded. So you need a corner, maybe a number 1 corner, which would be a high pick. So you need a number 1 corner. You need another safety. You need 2 linebackers. That's 4 needs on defense right there. We haven't even got to their front line. They need a pass rushing tackle badly. That's a 5th need. And they need a defensive end opposite Bosa. That's a 6th need. And they probably could use another lineman just for depth purposes because Givens and some of these guys are going to be gone. So you got 6 or 7 needs on defense. What does that add to? That's 12 or 13 needs that you have to fill between now and next year. You really still think you're going to be all in on Max Crosby, huh? You're going to give multiple picks, maybe 3 or 4 picks away from Max Crosby, including premier picks. Once again, you need on defense, you need a safety, a number 1 corner, 2 linebackers, a pass rushing defensive tackle, probably an edge rusher, and maybe 1 more defensive lineman. So you literally have a dozen needs. You need half dozen players on offense. You need a half dozen players on defense. And several of those are primary needs because all your great players are old. Who are the great players on this team that are under 25? Let's go name them. That would be Upton Stout, maybe Malik Mustafa. Okay. And maybe Mikael Williams. And that great is really using that's a very liberal use of great since Mikael Williams had 1 sack as a rookie, but we'll give him great because he was really good against the run. I'll give you even Collins and West and call them great, which I don't think they're great, but I think maybe one of them becomes great. So you got 1, 2, 3. You got Mustafa 4, Stout 5. You got 4 or 5, foundation pieces on defense. But that's, who's your young foundation pieces on offense? Jordan James? Mac Jones? I mean, Tonjes? Dom Pooney? Connor Colby? I'm hoping Jordan Watkins. Don't tell me Ricky Pearsall. He can't even get on the field. So there you have it right there. Let's hear Tim's question to John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan because he asked this question. He sort of verbalized it, and we will share the screen and let you hear it. Here it is from the presser the other day, Kawakami asking this question, and it's a lengthy minute or two here because Shanahan gives him a long answer, and then Lynch gives him a long answer. Here's what they had to say.
Kyle, in after letting go a lot of players last offseason, you talked about opening up a new kind of window of contention. Do you have a little distance on the way this is ending? Can you talk where you are maybe in this cycle? Was this season almost kind of ahead of schedule? And what does it set up for you financially and roster-wise this offseason? Is it time to maybe make some more spending? Is it time to try to make some more dramatic moves to try to take a bigger leap?
Yeah, that is a broad question. A good one. Yeah, last year was a huge challenge. We've salary cap wise and what we've gone for numbers of years. You can't do that every year. That's the way it's set up. And we had done that too many years in a row. So we had to make a decision to cut on money last year. That wasn't us being cheap or anything. We actually spend almost as much or more than everybody. That's what you have to do in the cycle of how it's all based. And more so than the injuries. That was the hardest thing to overcome is how many good players we had to let go out of this building that went and helped a lot of other teams. That's why when we did have significant injuries to some very good players, yeah, it was more daunting. That would have been in years past, because the guys we would have hung on when you lose a guy like Fred or you lose a guy like Nick, those guys we lost because of free agency and stuff that we had to do because of the previous year. So yes, if you would have told me that we lost those guys before the season with what we were going into, I wouldn't have expected us to have the record and stuff that we did. But that's when you look at things as a whole and you try to give a narrative to a whole. Like we just prepare for a game each week, and there was very few Sundays that we felt by the time we got there that we didn't have a chance to win. And I thought we did play well. I thought our players grinded and overcame a ton of things this year, and it gave us a chance to make the playoffs. And I never sit there and say like, oh, this will be successful if we just get close to the playoffs or something like that. I mean, we always expect to try to compete for the playoffs. We know some seasons are going to be harder than others, which we thought this would be. And I am proud to a degree of what we accomplished. That doesn't mean I'm sitting here 3 days removed and having great perspective. You know, once you get to that point, you believe you can get to the next point, because you can't get that far if that isn't possible. So we're real disappointed right now with how the season ended, and I'm still dealing with that, which it'll get easier over the weeks and stuff. And then as we start to look into putting our coaching staff together, which, obviously losing Robert and stuff, there's definitely some holes there that we got to replace. And then once you do that, then it's me catching up with John, with where we're at financially, what we can do, what the options are, what's available in free agency, what's available in the draft, what helps you on this year, what helps you to the next year. And all that stuff is connected. We're going to always try to do as well as we can to compete each year. But some years are harder than others in terms of what you can do financially. And I know I'm not there yet, but that's stuff that I'll be getting caught up from these guys over the next 2 months.
Yeah, Tim, and I think just to add a little context to that, and it's a very fair question, because we did watch the likes of Mooney Ward, Talanoa Hufanga, Dre Greenlaw, Javon Hargrave, Malik Collins, I'm missing Leonard Floyd. A lot of guys left. I think that spoke to how good our roster was, and people want what we've kind of created, and we've built. Our players have built what Kyle has built, and that's tough to watch that. Now, I think the thing that sometimes gets lost, we did sign our franchise quarterback to a big deal. We signed George Kittle and Fred Warner to extensions. We signed Colton McKivitz, that we felt like was a really smart move for our roster and needed. And so those are some kinds, the ebb and flows of this thing that you have to. And like Kyle said, we've been pedal to the metal for a while. There always is reckoning. I think what that did too, though, is, we had an 11-person draft class. All 11 of those guys are still in this building. We got great contributions from a lot of them. A lot of them, unfortunately, or some of them, like Michael, it was cut short, but we really are excited about the impact that class is going to have moving forward. A lot of guys, because of the injuries, had opportunities to play. Then we get guys back. We got to keep them back, but we put that all together and we're excited. But yes, we will have a little more flexibility this year, and we're excited about that.
So they're going to have a little bit more financial flexibility, and they're excited about it. But, let's just be real about this. A little bit more financial flexibility doesn't mean that you can go get the best wide receiver in football and the best defensive end in football and trade for these guys. Nobody ever seems to mention, what are you trading? What do you have to trade? You have a late number 1 pick. You have Mac Jones, who they've stated they may not want to trade. So what do you got? You're gonna trade your 27, 28, 29, 30, 31. What do you trade? Number 1s into the future and really leverage yourself, really set your franchise back, all in the name of going for it this year. And he's like, Tim's like, are you guys a little bit ahead of schedule? Ahead of schedule? If anything, they're behind schedule. They haven't won a Super Bowl. All of their best players are old. Trent Williams, old. George Kittle, old. Probably out for the year. Nick Bosa, old. CMC, old. Fred Warner, old. The best players on this team are all in the twilight of their careers, whether they're Hall of Fame careers or just perennial Pro Bowl careers. They've been great players, don't get me wrong, but you can't say you're ahead of schedule. Ahead of what schedule? You have tons and tons of building to do. And the idea that they could just parlay all their assets for one big name guy, yeah, that's going to win the press conference. That's going to win the Twitter. There'll be lots of tweets from people going, hey, that's Max Crosby, man. They got Max Crosby. Yeah, but what if they have no corners and no offensive line and no receivers and no running game and nothing besides Max Crosby? What if they have Justin Jefferson but nothing else? I mean, the bottom line is you can't just always take shortcuts. It's not always going to be like a shortcut. We'll just get this one guy and the whole thing will work out. It's football. You need depth. You need depth of talent. And realistically, okay, let's say you traded your 1 and your 2 and a 3 and a future pick for Max Crosby. Okay. Now, how are you gonna fill your receiving core? Who are you gonna get? You're not getting Carnell Tate or Mekhi Lemon or Concepcion or Chris Bell or any of those guys, Jeremy Bernard. You're not getting any of the guys at the top of the draft. So you're gonna have to go into the draft and somehow unearth starting caliber receivers, and you're gonna have to do it on day 2. Now, I think there's a couple guys that might fit that category of like a day 3 sleeper at wide receiver. I really like Dylan Bell from Georgia quite a bit. I think he's definitely a day 3 wide receiver sleeper. Kind of like a poor man's Dion. And there's a few other guys, that are interesting names. But we're talking about late round flyers. You're talking about guys that are just are going to be struggling just to make the team. So this idea that you could just be like, we'll just trade all of our assets for Justin Jefferson. Okay, but who's on your D line? Do you want to lose with Justin Jefferson or lose with Max Crosby? Because that's what it's going to happen. You're going to get one of those guys. You're going to trade all your assets, and you're going to be so deficient in other areas that you're going to lose. And then people are going to be frustrated. Man, you got Bosa and Crosby. How come you guys? Well, yeah, but we have no pass rushing tackle. Our linebackers are replacement level. We have no number 1 corner. Or our safeties aren't good enough. Our offensive line doesn't open holes. We have no run game. We're leaning on McCaffrey, and he's older. We don't have any receivers. Kittle's out. We got no tight end. It's just real easy to sit there and say, go get Max Crosby. Go get Justin Jefferson. And for Tim to come out and be like, if Jefferson and Crosby are traded in March and the Niners don't get them, the offseason is a failure? Really? Really? Something tells me he'll be backing off that when they don't get Crosby and Justin Jefferson. Something tells me when Crosby and Jefferson don't come here, Tim's not going to want to hang with his the offseason's a failure take. He will probably amend that to be, well, maybe it's not a failure. You just can't have that kind of a bottom line. It's like your team has 10 needs, 12 needs, 15 needs. You need depth. You need volume. You got a volume class this last year, and how did it work for you? If you really look at the 49ers rookie class from this last year, how did it go? How do you think it went? The 49ers were, if you go back since 2020, they had how much production each NFL team has gotten from its rookie classes. The Niners are 30th out of 32 teams since 2020 in production that they've gotten from their rookie classes. This year alone, they would have been 18th in production from their rookie class. 18th. They got, good snaps out of Upton Stout, 663 snaps. Alfred Collins, 550 snaps. Marquise Siegel, 480 snaps. Connor Colby, 455 snaps. Mikael Williams, 385 snaps. CJ West, 334 snaps. Jordan Watkins played 25 snaps. Basically didn't play. Jordan James, even less, 17. Nick Martin, even less, 15. So, yeah, and last year was their volume class. So they went for volume, and they got 6 rookies who, found a way to contribute 300-plus snaps. But what happened to Watkins, James, and Martin? Those guys, are going to be more of a next year proposition. So rookies are a little bit of a hit and miss situation. All I'm saying is, yeah, it's real easy to say, go get Max Crosby. He's the best defensive end there is. Oh, go get Max. Go get Justin Jefferson. But it's really hard if you're like, well, what does it cost? Anybody can say go buy, but then somebody's got to actually bust out the checkbook. Anybody can say you ought to, but then somebody's got to actually write the check. Somebody's actually got to pay. You can order 1 million steaks at some restaurant, but somebody's going to have to pay the bill. And the 49ers, yes, are they going to have a little bit more money to spend? Yeah, but that money, if you need another receiver and you got a little bit more money to spend, go sign Romeo Doubs. Go sign Wan'Dale Robinson. Go sign, receivers that aren't going to cost you an arm and a leg. You need a pass rusher. There's no question about that. They need edge defenders. Instead of trading your first, second, and third round pick and next year's number 1 to the Raiders for Crosby, because that's what they're going to want. He's their main guy. He's their face of their franchise. He's in his prime. They're going to want a king's ransom for him. You may want to go with Trey Hendrickson in free agency instead. You may want to, look around the free agent market and see if you can find somebody. Arden Key, Joseph Osai, just to name it, Azeez Ojulari, from the Eagles, Adafe Owe from the Chargers, Boye Mafe from Seattle. These guys are free agents as well. They're more cost-effective free agents. Kingsley Enagbare would be a good one from Green Bay. Made less than $1 million last year. Michael Clemens, who was with Robert Saleh with the Jets, made 1.1. He's 270 pounds. I think he would thrive in the wide 9. Ogoronkwo finished up with Philly on their practice squad, but he had some productive years with the Rams and Browns. Before that, he's got experience as an outside rusher in the wide 9. There are guys to get that aren't Max Crosby that are not going to blow up your entire offseason. So it's just really easy to be like, you need a defensive end. Go get Max Crosby. You need a wide receiver. Go get Justin Jefferson. Yeah, but then if you get those guys, you could get those guys, but that's all you'll get. You'll get Max Crosby, but then your next pick's going to be in the second half of the 4th round. You can get Justin Jefferson, but your next pick's going to be, late on day 2 or early on day 3. So then the question is that the route to go? Or is the route to go maybe to trade down from the first round and have multiple picks in rounds 2 and 3 and see if you could take multiple bites of the apple with prospects that you like? Do you kill it with numbers or do you look for 1 star? And I just don't think that you're always in position to go for that 1 star. You can go for 1 star when you're Brian Gutekunst and you've hit in the draft, 7 or 8 times in a 2-year span. And now you've got, a lot of cap room and you need edge rush difference makers and bring on Micah Parsons. That was not everybody. It's not prudent for every team in every scenario to trade for a great player. You have to earn the right to trade for 1 great player by dominating in the draft and unearthing players on day 2 and day 3 and after the draft. And so that you've got a bunch of players and you've got depth. And now you just are 1 great player away. If the 49ers had everything buttoned down, they were just 1 defensive end away. I'd agree with Tim. Go get Max Crosby. Pay that premium of a price and get Crosby. He is the final piece to your puzzle, okay? But if he's not the final piece to your puzzle, you can't blow all your assets on Max Crosby. If Justin Jefferson is the last thing that you need, then yeah, trade multiple number 1s. Get Justin Jefferson. There's a right time to go all in for 1 asset. But what you can't do is you can't go all in and up the ante and then miss and then do it multiple times. You can't do it. You can't trade 4 picks for Trey Lance and then miss on Trey Lance. You can't give all your free agent dollars to Javon Hargrave and then have Javon Hargrave just be pretty good and not great. If you're going to devote those many assets to one part of your roster, you got to have a for sure deal, and you got to have hit on your mid and late round picks in previous drafts. And the 49ers are not there. They are not in position with 12 realistic needs. They got to, if they want any chance to win the Super Bowl, they better fill at least 9 of those 12 needs. And they don't even have 9 picks. And so they're going to have to hit free agency, but they're going to have to do it prudently and smartly. And you're not just going to be able to shop off the top shelf. I want nothing but Grey Goose. Yeah, but you're on a pop-off budget, you know? I want nothing but the finest of the fine. That's fine, but you got champagne taste and you're on a beer budget. You better bust out some old Milwaukee's best and get ready to live with it. So anybody in the upper deck and anybody who's just a casual can say, go get a star. Go get a star. It doesn't take any intellect or any foresight or any vision or anything to say, go get the best player in football. Go get Justin Jefferson. Of course. We all want Justin Jefferson. Go get Max Crosby. Of course. But really, Tim, you're going to go to the point where the offseason is a failure if the Niners don't get Justin Jefferson or Max Crosby and they're dealt? Really? Really? That's an awfully strong take. And I don't agree with it at all. I think the better, smarter play is to go for guys that you haven't heard of that your scouts think are good. Go find the next Justin Jefferson. Go find the next Max Crosby. Justin Jefferson was a late first-round pick. Go find a late first-round receiver that you think's the next Justin Jefferson. Max Crosby was not a high number 1. Go get somebody in the day 2 that you think can really rush the passer. This is where your scouts are going to have to be unearthed, guys. This is where they're going to have to be really sharp. You can't always replace, you can't shop off the top shelf for everybody. You can get Crosby, but you can't get Crosby and Jefferson. And if you got Crosby and Jefferson, you probably can't get anybody else for years to come. And you're probably trading multiple number 1s into the future. So all I'll say is, yeah, it's easy to say, go get those guys. It's easy to me, it's crazy to say that if you don't get those guys, it's an offseason has been a failure. That's way, way too hot of a take. And one that I don't think Tim would stick with once they don't get those guys. You're going to tell John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan that there's no chance of their offseason being successful if Max Crosby and Justin Jefferson get traded to teams that aren't the 49ers? Really? That seems like a very, very, do as I say or you're idiots. It's like, and you've drafted for what team? And you've picked what players and you're wearing which rings? Yeah, it's a fan take. It's a fan take. And I expect a lot of you guys as fans to agree with the take because we all love Max Crosby. We all love Justin Jefferson. But the bottom line is it's easy to get those guys. It's easy to advocate to go get those guys. It's harder to actually go do it. And then what do you got left to build out the rest of your roster? Are you okay with Max Crosby if you got nothing on offense? Are you okay with Justin Jefferson if you're a disaster on defense? Do those guys even want to come here if they're on a team that doesn't have a chance to win? Probably not. All right. 49er football season is presented by Sleeper, the fastest growing fantasy platform in the world. It's a one-stop shop. You get blazing fast news, real-time stats, group chat, season-long leagues, and, of course, Sleeper picks for daily fantasy. Use promo code Larry, and Sleeper will match your first deposit up to $100. Links in the description. Terms and conditions do apply, and thanks to Sleeper for being a proud sponsor of The Krug Show. And thanks to all of you guys for supporting The Krug Show on YouTube.